In this video, I'm going to share 10 common sense rules I follow to help me save money, to help maintain my minimalist principles, to help me implement more slow living into my life, and to generally help me live happier and better. Let's not waste any time, let's jump right into it. Rule number 1 is that only you have to live with the consequences of your own actions. That should be pretty self-explanatory, but it really applies to many different aspects of life. We could look at it from a financial perspective with the understanding that the way that we manage our finances, the way that we choose to spend or save our money is going to be what ultimately dictates the type of life that we have, and those are decisions that we can make for ourselves, but we also have to live with the consequences of those decisions. We could also look at it from a habit forming or productivity or minimalist perspective, knowing that, for example, if I don't clean up after myself when I have dinner tonight, if I leave a sink full of dirty dishes, I'm going to wake up in the morning to a dirty kitchen, and ultimately that's my choice to make, but then I have to live with the consequences of that choice. To some extent, we all have autonomy in life. We have the ability to make the decisions we want to make for ourselves, but with autonomy comes responsibility, and with responsibility comes consequences. If you pick up unhealthy or self-destructive habits, once again, those are your decisions to make. As an adult, you can do whatever you want with your life, but then once again, you will have to deal with the consequences that come down the road, whether that is in the form of your physical or your mental health or your relationships with your family and friends, etc. With that said, there's also a positive side to this rule, which is that you can do whatever it is that makes you happy in life, because only you have to answer to yourself. If you make different lifestyle choices or you have different priorities from other people, that's perfectly okay if that's what's truly going to make you happy. Trying to appease other people is never going to lead to good consequences for you. It's never going to lead to the outcome you're hoping for. And at the end of the day, every decision you make is going to be one that you have to live with. The only person you should ever be trying to impress, really, is yourself. Rule number 2 is that if you have to put something on a credit card, you can't afford it. I know that's going to rock some boats, it's going to rattle some cages.
Hey, stop that!
But that's the truth. If you have to put something on credit, you probably shouldn't be buying it. Contrary to popular belief, credit cards are not some magical modern world invention that allow you to get things that are outside of your pay scale.
Oh God, it's so unnecessary!
They are exploitative, and in the wrong hands they can be very dangerous, and they can allow you to get yourself into a world of trouble that will take you decades upon decades to get out of. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't ever use credit cards. In fact, I pretty much use a credit card for every purchase that I make. But there is a big difference between using a credit card because you want to and using a credit card because you have to. If you're somebody that can manage your finances, if you're somebody that can get your credit card bill in the mail and pay it off in full every single month, using a credit card to do things like boost your credit score or get cashback rewards is a great choice to make. But if you're using a credit card to pay for things that you otherwise couldn't afford to buy, all you're doing is digging yourself into a very deep hole of very high compounding interest rates, and that is the last thing in the world that you should be trying to do.
How are you gonna get out of here?
We'll dig our way out!
Rule number 3 is write it down. I promise you, whatever it is, whether it's a brilliant idea that you had, whether it is a grocery item that you've just run out of, if you don't write it down, you're not going to remember. We've all been there. We've run out of something and been like, I should add this to my grocery list. No, that's okay. I'll for sure remember when I get to the grocery store tomorrow. No, you won't. Or we have this brilliant idea, whether it's for work, whether it's for a creative project, whatever it may be for, you have this wonderful idea and you're like, oh, that's such a good idea. There's no way I can forget this by tomorrow or by this evening. And believe me, you are gonna forget. I've done it 1,000 times. I've had a million great ideas that I've completely lost because I was so sure I'd remember them if I didn't write them down. Not only would I forget the actual idea, but I'd forget that there even was an idea that I wanted to write down in the first place. So whatever it may be that you're trying to remember, just write it down because you're otherwise not gonna remember, I promise you. Hey, by the way, if you're enjoying this list so far, maybe do me a quick favor and just drop a like. Thanks. Rule number 4 is to keep your private shit private. There is nothing more uncomfortable than when you first meet somebody and they just immediately word vomit in front of you and overshare every intricate detail of their life that you probably didn't need or want to know. And this can be the case whether we're talking about financial habits, whether we're talking about health, whether we're talking about family drama. There are certain things that are just better kept to yourself.
It's a secret.
Shut up.
And I'm not saying that any of these things need to be stigmatized or are things you should be embarrassed of. In fact, what you feel comfortable sharing with another person will differ dramatically from person to person and from relationship to relationship. But I don't think you should feel obligated to share details with other people, and I don't think that it's necessarily healthy if there are a lot of people who know absolutely everything about you. How much money you make, how much debt you're in, what kind of medical issues you have, what your mental health history may be, the relationships you have with your parents or your exes or whatever it may be. Some of those things will be valid to share with the people that are close to you in life, but not everything is, and there are some things that are better kept to yourself. In fact, I would make the argument that a vital part of self-improvement and of success and of anything that you want to accomplish, a vital part is knowing what to share and what to keep to yourself. And unfortunately, we will all encounter people at some point in our life that don't have our best interest in mind. People who will take the private things that you tell them and use it against you, or gossip and spread it to other people. So ultimately, you need to be particular about what parts of you share and specifically who you share them with. And there are always going to be certain things that are best kept inside just to yourself, because your business is not everybody else's. Rule number 5 is create more than you consume. This is a saying that is tossed around a lot in the creative industries, particularly with online creators, where they say, don't waste all your time just watching other people's content, make your own. And I do agree with that to some extent, though I would argue that gaining inspiration from others is a big part of creative entities as a whole. But when I say create more than you consume, I don't just mean for people who make content or make art. I mean energy, I mean kindness, I mean relationships. I mean, rather than always being a taker, be more of a giver. Offer more help than you ask for. Be the type of friend that you've always wanted to have. Put more out into the world than you take. Leave every place that you've been better than you found it. And I don't say any of this from perspective of hippy-dippy karma or anything like that. On the contrary, I wouldn't suggest to do things just for the hope that they come back to you. I would say do things just for the intention of doing them. Just make an effort to be the kind of person that you would want to have around you. Rule number 6 is that not all wants are needs, but you need to have wants. Try saying that 3 times fast. Not all wants or needs, but you need to have wants. Not all wants or needs, but you need to have wants. Not all wants or needs, but you have to have needs. Okay, forget it. At a very early age, I had to learn to decipher between needs and wants, because in the environment that I lived in, money was never abundant, so it was a very necessary life skill. And I do think that it's a very necessary life skill for everybody to have, to be able to look at something and know whether they truly need it for survival or it's something that they just want or that they think will make them happy. And just because you want something, just because you think something will make you happy, doesn't necessarily mean that you need it, doesn't necessarily mean that you can afford it, and doesn't necessarily mean that it's something you should spend your money on. But to be quite honest with you, I am sometimes guilty of taking that to a bit of an extreme. I have often found myself thinking about things that are somewhat frivolous, things that I want, things that I think will make me happy, but then deciding that they are a waste of money because it's not a life or death need, it's not groceries, it's not gas in my car, so then I don't really need it and therefore I shouldn't buy it. And I do think that that is a toxic mindset to have. I think that things can absolutely be taken to an extreme, and like I said, I think I have definitely done that at certain times. I think it's really important to be reasonable and be objective in the decisions that you're making, but as the saying goes, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. I don't know who Jack is, but the truth is that if you remove all of the extra things in life that add happiness to your day, all of the things that give you fulfillment, and you hyperfixate just on the bare bones necessities, you're gonna have a really mundane life. You're gonna have a really miserable life. And so while I don't go out and spend money excessively on things that I can't afford or things that are totally frivolous and unnecessary, the truth is that I sometimes have to remind myself it's okay to buy yourself something just because it makes you happy. A somewhat recent example I can give you guys would be right behind me. You can see I got my record player and my speakers all set up. I got that a few months ago. That's something that I wanted for a very long time, and it's something that I got very close to buying multiple times, and then every time I would talk myself out of it because I didn't need it. And that's just not a fun way to live. And so this was a reasonable purchase. I got a reasonable deal on it. I got the record player refurbished. I got the speakers open box. Like, I did what I could do to save money on it. But ultimately, it's something that I have wanted for a long time. Certainly not an impulsive buy. It's something that I have gotten a lot of use out of since I got it, and it's really brought a lot of happiness and joy to my life, and so it's worth the money to me. Many times I've found out the hard way that when you only spend your money on the bare necessities, going to work feels that much worse. You feel that much more tired at the end of the day. You just feel like you're running on a treadmill, and for what? Because you're not getting any sort of happiness or excitement or joy in your life at all. So within reason, you have to treat yourself, and while it's totally true that not every want is a need, you do need to have some wants sometimes, and that's perfectly healthy and perfectly okay. Rule number 7 is that no is a complete sentence, and it's not rude. If somebody asks something of you that you're not comfortable with, you are absolutely not obligated to do that thing, and it is perfectly fine to say no and not provide a further explanation. And choosing to say no without explaining yourself is not rude. Your life is your life, and you don't owe people an explanation for the things that make you comfortable or uncomfortable or the things that you're willing or unwilling to do. I'm sure we've all been in situations in the past where we've been coerced into doing something or convinced to do something that goes against our gut and goes against our instinct of what we want to do or what we're comfortable with. And we all know that as uncomfortable as it might have been in that moment to say no, having to deal with the consequences, again, going back to that first thing, the consequences of our actions, is often so much more uncomfortable than it would have been just to put a stop to it from the start. So if somebody asks something of you and you're just not down to do that thing, whatever it is, just say, no thank you, and cut off the conversation right there. It is a muscle that you have to flex, and the more you flex it, the stronger that muscle gets, and the easier it becomes. And when you set those boundaries and you enforce those boundaries, you'll often find that people will stop trying to walk over those boundaries. People will stop trying to ask things of you that they know are an imposition because they know that you're not going to go for it. And that is a wonderful feeling. Rule number 8 is the absolute holy grail for me, and it is that if you're in a bad mood, you should go for a walk. There is nothing in the world that helps me to clear my mind and get over my bad mood more than a little bit of fresh air, some endorphins, a little bit of exercise. Especially, I like to go with Levi. I've talked about this a lot, but that's kind of like my quiet time. It's kind of like my meditation, my Zen moment of just peace and quiet, spending some time outside. And I often will find myself being in a bad mood. Maybe it's about work, maybe it's about a personal relationship, maybe it's about, really, it could be about anything. And I feel myself getting grumpy and grouchy, and all I do is I force myself, even when I don't really feel like it, I put on my running shoes, I go outside, I walk around for half an hour, and I come back and I feel like a completely different person. If you have ever been in a situation where you're just feeling bad for a reason that you can't explain, if you're feeling like you want to chew somebody out and maybe you know that they don't deserve it, whatever the situation is, just go for a walk and see if you still feel the same way about it afterwards. Because if you're anything like me, it'll just make you feel so refreshed and so much better. Rule number 9 is be kind to animals. I could probably go off on a very long-winded tangent about this. I will spare you guys at the moment, but I will say this. It takes nothing away from a human to be kind to an animal. And in our day-to-day lives, there are so many opportunities for us to make the decision between kindness and harm. And the more times that you start to make those decisions, you start to reach for the kindness rather than the harm, you start to really recognize how many harmful decisions there really are being made on a day-to-day basis. It will open your eyes in a way that you probably wish they weren't going to be opened, but I think that it's a really important thing to be aware of. I think that human superiority and supremacy is a huge issue. Being born as humans are things that we lucked into. It's not something you accomplished, and doesn't make you more special than anyone or anything else. And so just having a little bit of compassion and being a little bit more self-aware about the decisions you make and how you interact with the world around you will really change you for the better in a lot of ways. And finally, rule number 10 is don't shit where you eat. I am a huge believer in the fact that your home should be your sanctuary. It should be where you're able to decompress, where you're able to be your truest, most authentic version of yourself, and where you're able to feel the most comfortable and the happiest. And anything at all that contradicts that takes away from that feeling of comfort and contentment, should not be allowed through your front door. Anything that disrespects you or your environment or the things that are important to you, anything that causes you undue stress, anything that runs the risk of damaging your home or your belongings or the things that matter to you, should not be welcome in your home, point blank, the end. I think that if you work remotely from home, one of the most important things you can do is to separate your working environment from your living environment. Set up a little office in a spare bedroom if you can, or in a separate little corner, or whatever you can do, but try to really contain it so it doesn't spread across your entire house, because before you know it, your house is going to feel like your office, and you can't relax and unwind when you're in your office. Anyways, that's the list. Those are my 10 common sense rules for life. These are the principles that I follow, which help me to keep my shit together, help me to keep my finances in order, help me to be as happy and healthy as I possibly can be, help me to stick to my minimalist and slow living principles, the things that are important to me, and help me to be the truest, most authentic version of myself, which I think is something we should all be striving for. I'm very curious to know your thoughts on my list, and more specifically, if you have any principles of your own, any personal principles or rules that you follow which help you to be the truest, best, happiest version of yourself. If so, drop me a comment below and let me know. If you enjoyed this video at all, if you found it entertaining, helpful, insightful, anything like that, please go ahead, hit that like button. Please also subscribe if you haven't done so yet. It's totally free. It takes you 1 second. Hit the little notification bell. You can follow me on Instagram at according_to_Nicole. You can check me out at patreon.com/accordingtonicole if you would like to further support this channel. Other than that, thank you guys so much as always for watching. Take care, and I will see you next week.